Tom is a longtime my hero. He's an outstanding lawyer and probably the most gifted activist I've ever had the honor to work with. So it is a big thrill for me to introduce Tom Carpenter to share some background on Hanford with you today.
So I'll be the first to blow the whistle today. In full disclosure, Dana Gold is also the chair of the Hanford Challenge Board, and so she is kind of my boss. And I was her boss at one point, so we keep switching these roles back and forth. So thanks for coming out today. This is great, and I always enjoy the chance to talk to folks about what's going on at the most contaminated nuclear site in the United States and one of the top 10 in the world. And I'm going to focus on the Hanford nuclear waste tanks, which we're calling tanks in trouble. And this is really just kind of an overview of the issue. As Dana mentioned, we work with whistleblowers at Hanford Challenge. We hold meetings like this. We get involved in the details of the cleanup. And tonight I'm just, again, just going to hit some of the high points about Hanford to kind of set the stage for what Walt is going to talk about. So this is a quick film footage of what Hanford is about. It made the plutonium in World War II that was dropped on Nagasaki. It went into the bomb that made the Fat Man bomb. It also made the plutonium for the first nuclear bomb test in the desert, the Trinity test. And it went on to make most of the plutonium, about 2/3 of the plutonium, the rest of our nuclear arsenal, which is tens of thousands of nuclear weapons. And just in case you don't know where it is, that red dot down there is the Hanford site. It's in the state of Washington. It is about 250 miles upstream of Portland. And it was, of course, this is the Columbia River here. And the site was chosen in part because it included the Columbia River. They needed that cold, clear water to cool down the industrial processes, the reactors on the site where they built 9 reactors eventually. And they also needed a sewer, basically, to dump highly radioactive water into the river to take it away. Unfortunately, it came this way. Was made the Columbia River the most radioactive river in the world for a time. All those reactors are now shut down. So, nuclear whistleblowers are very important to us, and it is folks like Walt Tamasitis and others that we rely on to tell us what's been going on. Hanford has a long history of secrecy and even deception. It was a national security site. Beginning in the mid-1980s, whistleblowers started to come forward, brave employees to talk about environmental problems out there, mismanagement. They made public disclosures to Congress, the news media, and public interest groups like ours about wrongdoing, violations of nuclear safety laws, environmental violations, and waste, fraud, and abuse. These employees were called whistleblowers, and they've been the main source of credible information about problems at the Hanford site for the past 25 years. I'll say that again, they have been the main source of credible information about problems. The government does not tell you what's happening out there until they have to. And that has been a pattern that continues up till last week. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And so we need these insiders if we're going to get a safe and effective cleanup at the Hanford site, which is what we need if we're going to protect current and future generations. So we exist because we need a safe and effective cleanup. And we work with whistleblowers, as I've said, and help them voice their concerns. We foster public education. We try to influence policy, and we conduct an independent environmental sampling. As promised, I'm going to talk about the tanks. There's lots of waste at the Hanford site. We already heard about 56 million gallons of highly radioactive nuclear waste. This waste is stored in 177 underground waste storage tanks. That 56 million gallons is really not the volume, it's what's in the waste. It's the radioactivity, the chemicals. It's just a very toxic concentrated crude that ended up in these tanks. And they represent now one of the largest headaches for the nation in terms of toxic waste cleanup. So how dangerous is this high-level radiation? I like to talk about this because people really don't have a concept that this waste is so radioactive that the amount that can fit on the leg of a fruit fly is considered to be a harmful dose, a harmful health dose. And in fact, that's happened at Hanford site. They've had to shut down acres and acres of the site because fruit flies had landed on contaminated materials and then landed on workers' lunches and in the cafeterias and whatnot. It took them a while to kill the fruit flies and take care of the problem. And yet we've got this large inventory out there. So we've got quite a daunting problem. This is the diagram of a single shell tank. So leaks from these tanks, it's just a steel liner surrounded by a concrete shell, and leaks from these tanks go straight into the environment. Well, that means the soil, and below the soil is the groundwater, and the groundwater connects to the river. These tanks were all built in the 1940s and 50s. And I think the last one was built in 65, maybe. And they were designed to last 20 years. So a tank built in 1949, for instance, ended its design life in 1969, which is about when we sent a man to the moon. So these tanks are now in trouble. And most of the tanks at the Hanford site, is 149 of these single shell tanks, are essentially in trouble. Half these tanks have failed. Half of these single shell tanks have failed. They've leaked at least 1 million gallons of radioactive waste into the ground. And it's starting to enter the groundwater. There are plumes in the groundwater. Some of these tanks are still leaking today. We don't have a way yet to go after the leaked waste. It's under these tanks. And to get to it, you have to remove the tanks, for instance. And the government just does not have the appetite to do that. And yet, it will continue to migrate for hundreds and even thousands of years into the groundwater and continue to contaminate that groundwater, which of course communicates to the river. Unhappily, the government has no plan and has no intention of cleaning up this leak waste. We disagree with that decision, but and we're working on changing that. So, these tanks are now the subject of a lot of scrutiny because recently there was an announcement that 6 of these tanks had failed again and were re-leaking. I guess 2 of these tanks were new leakers and 4 were old leakers. But the information is kind of new. They have apparently a student intern figured this out or recently, which is kind of an ironic story. But someone looked through all the information and said, "Hey, I think you've got some leaking tanks out here." And now they're looking at, well, maybe 20 of them are leaking, and maybe even 80 have suffered what they call liquid waste reductions in the tanks. They're euphemism for leaks. But it could be that they evaporated away or whatever. There's also liquids getting into the tanks, complicating the issue of what's leaking and what isn't leaking. So this is an example of some of the press that happened after DOE announced that we've got new leaking tanks out there. This is a double shell tank, and there are 28 of these new double shell tanks. And what that really means is it's a tank within a tank. And these tanks were built in the 70s and 80s. And they're supposed to last 40 years. The first of these tanks has just recently failed and begun to leak. Already we're looking at a big problem there. And this guy is another whistleblower named Mike Geffrey, who works at Hanford. And Mike has been out there as an instrument tech for 26 years, and he's well respected. Never been a problem to anybody before. But when he saw what he is saying is that the company that runs the tank farms for the government knew over a year ago that the tanks were leaking, or a year before they actually announced it, which is a big deal because the law says that you have no time. You have to immediately report a failed double shell tank leak. You've got to report that immediately. And they had good evidence that was ignored, and he was right there, and he did these surveys and all that. So he's gone public on King 5 News, which is just caught on fire. And if you're interested in Hanford, you should go check out king5.com and look at all the Hanford stories they've been doing recently. It's like the 8th story ran last. The government has been building a treatment facility to immobilize the tank waste in glass logs. This process is called vitrification. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this. To do this, they need a big facility that's going to take waste from the tanks, mix it, separate it, melt it into glass. Those molten glass is poured into steel canisters, and those canisters are allowed to cool and then put into a deep geological repository somewhere someday, which we don't have. Problem is that we've been building this plant now since the year 2000, and the original cost estimate was supposed to be $4.6 billion. It's now over $13 billion. It was supposed to open a couple of years ago. It's now supposed to open in 2019 or 2022, except that because of technical safety issues and concerns raised by first Walt Tanasitis and then others, the facility has been suspended. The pretreatment and high-activity waste melters have been design and construction are on hold while the government attempts to sort through these issues. We don't have a safety nightmare on our hands when they turn the plant on. But the bottom line is that waste treatment plant, which is this is what we're supposed to do with our tank waste. It's not going to open anytime soon. There's going to be significant delays and significant cost overruns, and this is a problem. So here's where I get to do a little advocacy here. Tanks are failing. The waste treatment plant is in trouble, and we say you need new tanks out there. It pains us to say that, but the Oregon governor, the Washington governor have also said, we're out of time, you don't have enough space in the existing sound tanks that we can transfer waste into from tanks that fail, so we really just don't have a choice. And give us some time to get this waste treatment plant corrected. So I'm not going to steal any thunder from Walt and talking about some of the safety issues. I'm going to let him talk about that. But I will say that we can't be successful without a public that is communicating to people like Senator Wyden, who is now in a very important position in the Senate as chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, is very aware of Hanford, has met with the Hanford whistleblowers, has a lot of power to oversee what's happening at the Department of Energy.